Who was Julius Caesar, really? We all know the name, right? The conquests, the drama. It's an epic story. But today we're going to go a little deeper. We're going to try to get inside the head of the man himself, a guy so complex that even after 2,000 years, he's still a total enigma. Let's get into it.
You know, to even begin to understand Caesar's mind, we have to start with this brilliant observation. Now, it was actually about Napoleon, but man, it fits Caesar to a T. He wasn't a simple hero or a clear-cut villain. He was a puzzle. Every single time you think you've got him figured out, he does something that completely flips your opinion on its head, and that is the core of what we're looking at today.
And that central puzzle brings us to what we're going to call the Caesar paradox. This was a man who was basically defined by these huge, almost unbelievable contradictions. So let's start peeling back the layers.
I mean, just look at this. It's almost hard to wrap your head around how all these traits existed in one person. On one hand, the sources tell us he could be genuinely kind, often forgiving his enemies and turning them into allies. And yet, this is the same man who could be absolutely ruthless in war. He was charming, he was witty, but he was also incredibly vain and notoriously unfaithful. So how does one person contain all of that?
Well, to get a handle on this paradox, we have to go back, way back, to his youth. Because it seems like Caesar's entire personality was forged in those early years, where he very deliberately crafted this identity of being an outsider, someone separate from and, in his own mind, better than everyone else.
I mean, think about this. Even the way he dressed was a statement. While all the other Roman bigwigs wore the standard gear, Caesar rocked these tunics with long fringed sleeves, and get this, a super loose belt. The dictator Sulla even famously warned people to beware of that loose-girded boy. Now, this wasn't just some fashion quirk. It was a conscious choice to set himself apart, a visual sign of his defiance.
And this quote, it just nails the mindset behind the fashion. Supposedly, he was passing through some tiny village in the Alps, and his friends were joking about people trying to get power even in a place like that. Caesar's reply was dead serious. It wasn't about being powerful in Rome. It was about being number one, period, no matter where he was. His ambition was just absolute.
This story really shows you the insane, almost crushing weight of that ambition. See, he wasn't comparing himself to other Romans. He was comparing himself to Alexander the Great. And seeing that statue wasn't inspiring to him. It was this painful kick in the gut, a reminder that, in his own mind, he was already a failure. The pressure he put on himself was just extraordinary.
Okay, so all this ambition, this internal pressure, it all builds to the defining moment of his life. And this moment gives us maybe the clearest window we'll ever get into his psychology, the decision to cross the Rubicon. This was the point of no return. This was him, one man, against the entire Roman Republic.
So let's picture the scene. It's January, 49 BC. Caesar's standing right here, at the bank of a small, swollen river. But this isn't just a river. It's the line in the sand, both legally and symbolically. His enemies back in Rome have made it clear. If he crosses this river with his army, he's an outlaw, and it's war.
And we're told he actually hesitates here. He's not just thinking about military strategy, he's wrestling with the consequences. And the choice is just so stark. His own political survival or the peace of the entire known world. What do you do?
A friend who was with him that day recorded his words, and they're chilling. They're so revealing. Caesar literally weighs his own personal ruin against a world war, and he chooses the war. It's a calculation that is so self-absorbed, it's almost monstrous. In his mind, he owed it to himself, and that was that.
So what was this misfortune he was so afraid of? It was the loss of his dignitas. Now, this isn't just dignity as we think of it. For a Roman aristocrat, dignitas was, well, it was everything. It was his honor, his status, his entire life's work rolled into one. And for Caesar, defending his personal dignitas was a good enough reason to plunge the world into total chaos. His cause was himself.
And he wins. Of course he wins. But that victory comes at this profound psychological cost. The very things that let him win the war, that outsider mindset, that supreme self-confidence, made him totally incapable of figuring out the peace and actually ruling Rome.
Just look at this timeline of his final months. It's just this rapid-fire escalation of honors. The Senate, which is now this mix of his fawning supporters and his terrified old enemies, just keeps piling titles on him. But Caesar, after all those years of being in absolute command of an army, seems to have just lost all patience for politics.
That moment he didn't stand up for the senators? It seems like a small thing, but it showed this huge psychological shift. He just didn't see them as his equals anymore. And as his power became totally absolute, this weird kind of fatalism started to set in. He dismissed his loyal Spanish bodyguard. It's almost as if the guy who was willing to start a world war just to save his own skin was now just tired of the effort. He actually said he'd lived long enough for both nature and for fame.
And this really captures his isolation at the end. After 14 years out on campaign, he was basically a stranger in the city he now ruled. He openly mocked the Republic, calling it an empty name. All his great rivals were dead. He had won the game so completely that the board was empty. The only person left to compete against was himself.
Okay, so let's try and tie all these psychological threads together. Why, after 2,000 years, can we still not look away from this guy? I think it's because he represents this fundamental and maybe tragic paradox about what it means to be great.
And this, right here, is the key takeaway from our whole exploration. His genius, his charm, his incredible success, it all came from him being an outsider, from being detached from the society he lived in. He could do what he did because he didn't play by their rules. But that was the very thing that made it impossible for him to ever truly lead the society he conquered.
And you have to wonder, behind that confident, cool mask, was there turmoil? One historian speculates on the psychological toll of the wars in Gaul, a war he pretty much started for his own fame. Did he feel the weight of those hundreds of thousands of lives? We'll never know for sure, of course, but it just adds another fascinating layer to this endlessly complex man.
And that incredible complexity is exactly why his story lasts. For more than 2,000 years, we've been trying to solve the puzzle of his mind, trying to square the circle between the merciful leader and the ruthless conqueror, the patriot and the rebel. So we end with this question. Was the sheer scale of his personality, his ambition, his talent, was it just too big to ever fit inside the box of the Republic or any stable system? Were his greatness and his failure simply two sides of the exact same coin? It's a question that, even now, is worth thinking about.